Well, Luffy is about to scrap with the giant Dorry, so let's see who's going to come out on top. But before we do, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, share this video with a friend, and join the Discord server down below. And with all that being said, let's jump into One Piece Volume 14, Instinct, featuring chapters 118 to 126. Part 1, Mr. 3. This will cover chapters 118 to 122. While the start of this section does involve Luffy fighting against Dorry, we need to set the stage for how we arrived at this moment, and the individuals pulling the strings. Mr. 3 and his partner, Miss Golden Week. As you learn from Igaram, the lower the number of a Baroque Works agent, the more powerful they are. Meaning that Mr. 3 is the most powerful agent we have encountered outside of Miss All's Sunday. And even worse, he is working alongside Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine, who have made their way to Little Garden. Mr. 3 is perfectly juxtaposed with that of Mr. 5 in a number of ways. He's a man who enjoys art, sipping on tea, and spending time inside a house made of wax. He's not only intelligent and seemingly 2 steps ahead of everyone else, but Mr. 3 espouses the idea that creativity will lead to victory and ultimately allow him to be promoted. And there are 2 things that need to be accomplished in order for him to reach this goal. Collecting the 200 million berry bounty on Dorry and Broggy's head, and defeating Princess Vivi and her friends. This is when we discover that the ale given to Dorry was an explosive planted by Mr. 5, causing Dorry's internal body to be severely damaged. Something that frustrates Luffy, enraging him to a level that we have not seen yet in the story, especially when Dorry traps Luffy using his home to weigh him down, and returns to battle with Broggy. Vivi notices this outburst from Luffy and is shocked about why Luffy is reacting in such a way towards the ale, and this highlights another trait that Luffy values in others: honor. Outside of dreams and friendship, Luffy values the activities, desires, or customs that people find honor in doing, such as the 2 giants clashing, a custom that has been passed down for generations in Elbaf, and an honorable tradition that was disrupted by Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine. And oh look, they just arrived on the scene. This section of the manga also deals with a ton of defeat, and this is for good reason. We see Dorry fall in his battle with Broggy, Karoo fall at the hands of Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine, and Vivi, Zoro, and Nami all get captured by Mr. 3. Oh, and this is also when we learn about Mr. 3's powers, as he is the master of the wax fruit. And once again, Oda takes this concept and expands it in ways that you probably wouldn't initially think are possible. Mr. 3 is able to take down Broggy using his ability, but also create wax replicas of people, and these replicas are ultimately what caused Nami and Zoro to get captured. This is when we find our characters at their lowest point. Luffy, Usopp, and Karoo are defeated, and Broggy, Nami, Zoro, and Vivi are stuck inside a wax candelabra and will become wax statues for Mr. 3's collection. I want to quickly say that this is the first time that One Piece has truly made me feel sick and incredibly uncomfortable, and this isn't a bad thing actually. The imagery of seeing Nami solidified in wax and imagining being trapped in an enclosed space with no way to escape is incredibly chilling, and does an extremely effective job raising the stakes for the audience and for the characters, as now there's seemingly no way that we can overcome this obstacle, and it appears that the defeat of the Straw Hats is inevitable. This is when the theme of honor is brought back up, as Broggy yells at Mr. 3 for not understanding how much the fight meant to him and Dorry. Broggy's hands are impaled with large knives, keeping him in place, as wax from the candelabra falls on the group, causing them to suffer a slow, painful death, as they slowly suffocate because of the wax. But Broggy's tenacity and willingness to fight sparked something within a man who I've not talked about much recently. That man being Zoro. This section of the volume reminds us of how badass Zoro is as a character, as he readies to slice his own legs off in order to escape the wax and fight against the 4 agents opposing him. Despite Nami and Vivi calling Zoro crazy, he refuses to die like this, and especially not without a fight. I've mentioned before that it felt like Oda seemingly changed Zoro's personality a bit here and there in the early part of the story, but this theme is something that has been embodied within Zoro from the very start. And the theme in question is never giving up and continuing the fight. And thanks to the inspiration provided by Broggy, we watch as Zoro prepares to cut off his legs in order to return to the fight. But before he manages to do so, we watch as 3 combatants, who have also been inspired to continue the fight, arrive on the battlefield. Part 2, Luffy and Usopp versus Baroque Works. This will cover chapters 123 to 124. While Zoro was attempting to cut off his legs in order to return to the fight, the combined efforts of Luffy, Usopp, and Karoo were finding a way to return to the fight themselves, and sure enough, they managed to do so, and needless to say, they're pretty angry. As I said previously, the imagery we see of Luffy is something we have not really seen before, with him pounding his head on the ground repeatedly out of sheer frustration about the battle between Dorry and Broggy concluding the way it did. This anger leads to Luffy facing off against Mr. 3, leaving Usopp and Karoo to deal with the combined force of Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine. And just like we saw in Arlong Park, we see both of these combatants' individual skills shine through in their respective battles. Luffy is once again the master battle strategist and is able to respond to attacks on the fly, such as using his legs and arms in creative ways to counterattack when they are encased in wax, and managing to destroy part of the candelabra in the process. But unfortunately, this backfires, and moves the proximity of the candles causing Zoro, Nami, and Vivi to be encased in wax closer, and accelerating the process. And as Luffy attempts to fix the situation, we finally see Miss Golden Week step into the spotlight and show off her power. I'm sure most of you have been wondering about Miss Golden Week, where she's been, and why I haven't mentioned her very much in this story so far. And that's because this is the first time you really see her do anything in the story. But as she enters, she shows off her colored-based traps. In a nutshell, Miss Golden Week has the ability to alter an individual's emotions based on her paint, and the various color of the paint she uses causes different effects, such as causing Luffy to do the opposite of what people say, laugh uncontrollably, and only attack in a certain direction, like a bull seeing a red cloth. This scene is not only creative in terms of Miss Golden Week's use of her powers, but also highlights Vivi's intelligence and quick wit, as she's able to figure out the color gimmick and respond accordingly. But this does little in the way of solving the group's problems, as the wax begins to grow to a lethal amount capable of suffocating the group trapped inside. We watch as Usopp utilizes what makes him special, namely, his own use of creativity in battle. Part 3, Creativity and Instinct. This will cover chapters 125 to 126. While Mr. 3 based this entire operation of his on his own creativity, Usopp is the master of creative gimmicks in battle, and we are once again reminded that while Usopp might not have the strength of Luffy, he more than makes up for it through the use of his mind. Usopp not only manages to free Luffy from Miss Golden Week's control, but he also devises a plan to free his dying friends from the wax, through the use of a rope soaked with oil that has been wrapped around the candelabra by Karoo. And as he's being crushed by Miss Valentine, Usopp calls out to Luffy to light the rope and save their friends. Luffy manages to defeat Mr. 3 in his Candle Champion form, a form that is said to have never been stopped before, reminding us that this is the very same thing said about Don Krieg before Luffy managed to defeat him and save the Baratier. And as Luffy lights the rope on fire, we are reminded as to why the Straw Hats are such a powerful unit. While Usopp might not be able to defeat Mr. 5 on his own, Zoro escapes from the wax and eliminates the threat for him. Same with Nami and Vivi, who managed to eliminate Miss Valentine. Where one member of the crew falls behind, another will step up to provide aid. And this is the nucleus that makes this group so powerful and effective. But as all of this is going down, Mr. 3 escapes, with Luffy hot on his tail, and opens up a new perspective on his fighting style that I had not considered before. That being, Luffy's instinct as his weapon. You probably all know about the scene where Luffy says instinct in response to the inquiry as to how he managed to take down Mr. 3. But this line is given so much more meaning to me now that I have broken down Luffy as a character throughout these videos so far. Luffy's instinct is arguably his best weapon. He's able to morph his body into various formations to protect himself, dodges attacks when he needs to, and can recognize pitfalls before they occur. All because of this instinct. I know that I've compared Luffy to Goku previously in terms of their shared battle brain, but it feels like Luffy has a latent form of Ultra Instinct in battle. And seeing this now, I'll make sure to point this out in future fights as we continue on in the series. And as I already alluded to, Luffy uses his instinct to pick Mr. 3 out of his group of wax doppelgangers and defeats him with a gum stomp, ending the fight and successfully rescuing everyone. Now, this is where the episode stops, right? Well, I think we should check in on Sanji. As I read this part of the volume, I was reminded of the feeling I had when I watched this portion of the anime. Namely, the feeling of anticipation for Sanji to show up and help in the fight against Mr. 3. I had this feeling again during my read-through, as it felt like Oda was setting up Sanji to have a hero's entrance into the battle and save the day. But nope, our favorite cook was enjoying some tea inside Mr. 3's wax home. But as the volume ends, Oda sets up a massive tease for what is brewing in the next volume. As Sanji picks up the transponder snail, it is revealed that the person on the other end of the line is none other than Mr. Zero, the leader of Baroque Works. That's it for today's episode. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, share this video with a friend, and join the Discord down below. And be on the lookout for volume 15 and 16 coming next week. This has been JT, and I hope you all have a very great weekend.